The reading this morning, brothers and sisters, is from Matthew 27, verses 50 to 54. That's Matthew 27, verses 50 to 54. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." That's the reading this morning, and I'm going to hand over to Chris now, who will bring us the word.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, it helps. Have I turned it off?
Should be on, I think.
Hello? Yeah, we're on. Good morning.
Morning.
Can you hear me now? That's good. When we say good morning, we're not just saying good morning. What we're doing is we're asking the Lord to give that person a blessing, a good morning, a good start for the day. Like a good breakfast. If you have a good start for the day, it's always better than having a bad start for the day. So when we say to each other, good morning, we're asking that the Lord will bless them. And there's nothing wrong with asking the Lord to bless somebody. I think it's one of the best things you can do. Because we all need blessings. I believe we move from one blessing to the next blessing to the next blessing. So, good morning.
Morning.
Ooh, I've got loads of blessings there. Ooh, I should be all right today then. That's good. So let's see what the Lord has got for us today. Right then, the Bible is in two parts. The Old Testament and the New Testament. Or the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. The Old Testament deals with sin using sacrifices and punishment. People had to give a sacrifice so they could be forgiven for their sins. The Bible tells us the price of sin is death. It is far better to kill a goat, a bull, a dove, a lamb, than it is to kill a person. There was a grandma who lived on a little farm, and she had a favourite little goat. She called him Billy. And she loved Billy. And one day, her son said, "Mum, we haven't got a sacrifice." "Oh well," she said, "we're not having Billy. He's mine." "But Mum, we've just had a new baby, a blessing from God. We've got to give him a sacrifice." "Well, you're not having little Billy, he's mine." When her son came to visit, and she had little Billy, her new grandson on her knee, and she looked into his face, she had realised how important life was. So she went up to her son and she said, "There you are, there's your sacrifice." It is far better that the blood of an animal was shed than our blood. God loved us so much, and still does, that he gave us a way that we could be forgiven and still have life. And that's because he loves us. The price of sin is death. Death means the shedding of blood. But for some sins, the punishment was actually death. One such punishment that the Jews used to use was stoning to death. They'd take you out of the city and throw rocks and stones until you were dead. But in the second covenant, in the new commandment, things were to change. Jesus came. He said he was the Son of God. He said he had the power to forgive sins. One day, the Jews decided to test him. And they brought a woman who'd been caught in adultery. And they said, the law says, which was the old covenant, if a woman is caught in adultery, she is to be stoned to death. Now, you think, Jesus got a big problem here. Because if he says you can't stone her, he's saying something against the law. And if he does say you can stone her, well, that's not good, is it? That's not the new covenant that he's bringing. And so he says, let the one without sin throw the first stone. So he's not saying they can't throw the stone. What he's saying is, if you're without sin, you throw the first stone. And one by one, they dropped their stones and went away. The Romans' favourite punishment for sin was crucifixion. They would have people on crosses outside the city gates, hanging there, moaning and groaning and dying and suffering. And the idea was, when you came up to the city and you saw these poor souls on the cross, it was a warning. If you break our laws, this is what will happen to you. So some people knew what would happen to them if they broke the law, and so they made sure they didn't break the law. But God decided that one day he was going to change all this sacrificing business. And that's why he decided that instead of goats and lambs and everything else, what he wanted was just one sacrifice. One sacrifice forever. One sacrifice that would deal with everything. There'd be no more bringing a lamb to slaughter, or bringing a goat, or buying a dove from the temple. He was going to do away with it all. Just one. But it had to be someone very special. It had to be someone sinless. So God looked around the earth and he could not find not one sinless person. He'd have to look somewhere else. So where did he look? He looked nearer home and he saw his son. And he decided that that was going to be the sacrifice. So he asked his son, will you go and be a sacrifice so that the old covenant can go and a new covenant can come? And as we know, he said yes. Not only did he say yes, he gladly said yes. Yes, Father. They're lost in sin. They don't know what they're doing. They're in a right state. If it has to be, then I will go. And God said, you're going to have to go as a baby. And the Holy Spirit and me will look after you. You have to do what I say and be led by the Spirit. And he was happy with that. So he gave up his glory. He gave up all his power. And he came as a baby in a manger. This was the start of the new covenant. In the old covenant, when we had to make sacrifices, I decided to pick just two stories. The first one is in Genesis 22, 1 to 19. Abraham offers his son Isaac. God decided to test Abraham, and he told him he was to sacrifice his son. Abraham didn't argue, he just did as the Lord said. And on the way, his son Isaac noticed there was no lamb, there was no goat, there was no doves, nothing, just him and his dad. So he says to his dad, Dad, we're going to sacrifice. Where is he? And his dad said, the Lord will provide. So that was good enough. So when they got to the altar, and he bound his son, and he got the knife out, he was just about to put it through his son's heart, when an angel appeared. Stop! Stop! And when he looked in a bush, there was a goat. Got his horns caught in the bush. There was his sacrifice. God wanted to see if Abraham would do what God asked. And of course, Abraham was prepared to do it. And so God saved Isaac. He never became a sacrifice. The next one is in 1 Kings 18, 25 to 38. And I like this one. This is one of my favourite ones. Elijah and the prophets of Baal. The prophets of Baal believed that Baal was God. But Elijah knew that that wasn't true. So one day, he said to the prophets, why don't you build a sacrifice to your God? And I'll build a sacrifice to my God. And then we'll know whose God is the real God. So they built a sacrifice, and they danced around, and they sang to their God, and they went going off. And they was doing it for about 3 or 4 hours, and nothing was happening. So Elijah thought he'd have some fun with them. He said, maybe your God's gone to toilet. Maybe he can't hear you. Perhaps you might shout a bit more and dance a bit more. Yeah, so off they go again. And And then he said, maybe your God's gone on holiday somewhere. And he can't see you because he's somewhere else. And he was telling them all these things, and they was believing it. And they was cutting their selves, and they was going off. And then he said, right, it's my turn then. So he said, pour some water on my sacrifice, dig a trench all the way around it, and fill it with water. So the sacrifice was wet through, there was water everywhere, and there was even a trench around it. And then Elijah prayed to God. Well, it looked like it wasn't going to be a sacrifice. Everything was wet through, there was water everywhere. I bet the prophets of Baal were laughing. And then all of a sudden, the power of God came from heaven and consumed the water and the sacrifice. Then the prophets of Baal realised something. Oh dear, perhaps Elijah was right all the time. Perhaps we should be praying to the God of all. Maybe we should be praying to Elijah's God. And they changed their mind and became believers. You see, the old covenant was all about sacrifice and punishment. But the new covenant, the New Testament, it got changed. He took away the sacrifice and he put something else in its place. Something a lot better. Something better for me, something better for you. It was called grace. We're here today because of God's grace. Grace is God's undeserved favour to us. Because the thing about grace is, you can't buy it. If you had all the money in the world, you couldn't buy God's grace. You can't earn it. You can't be so good that God gives you his grace. It says, all have fallen short. Like if you was an archer and you got your bow and arrow, your arrow would never reach the target. Because we're not good enough. Because we're sinful. The Bible says that our best efforts are like filthy rags. Who wants to be going around in filthy rags? Nobody does. So God gives us his grace. And today we took the bread and the wine because the sacrifice was made. Jesus came. He explained to people who he was. He showed people who he was. And then he died on the cross and paid the price for all of us. Today, God gives us his grace. He forgives us. He forgives us for what we did in the past. He forgives us what we do now. And he forgives us for what we do in the future. It is truly amazing. You would have thought, wouldn't you, that somebody would have wrote a hymn about it, wouldn't you? Because to me, it is one of the most amazing, if not most amazing thing, that I can come to the throne of grace and I can say, Father, I'm sorry. Father, I am weak. Father, I am just a sinful man. And God can say, okay, my son, it's forgiven. I think that is beautiful. sent his Son so that we could be forgiven. But you see, God don't just say, oh, well, I'll forgive you once, I'll forgive you twice, I'll forgive you 3 times. He says, it's covered, all of it. What you did in the past, what you do now, what you do in the future. What you do in the future, you don't even know what you're going to be doing in the future. But God knows, and he's already forgiven you for it. So I was wondering, as we finish, does anybody know an hymn that we might be able to sing about this grace that is so amazing? Pardon? Well, I think that sounds about right then. So shall we sing Amazing Grace? Yeah, is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
I'd say, John.
Is that okay, John?
Lovely, thank you.